Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to holidays and observances, and specifically holidays and observances by the name of St. Patrick's Day. And you might be thinking, but Lawrence, that's an Irish holiday. What's this got to do with Britain and America? Well, firstly, Britain and America is what my show is about. And secondly, both Britain and America have a relatively high percentage of Irish diaspora. That is, people who are ethnically Irish or their descendants who live outside of the island of Ireland. Try saying that after 12 Guinnesses. Given the occasion's well-known relationship with alcohol, I suspect some will. But before we look at some of the differences between British and American St. Patrick's Day, what is this day all about? Well, St. Patrick's Day, or St. Patty's Day as it's known throughout the world, or just North America, is a religious celebration held on March 17th, marking the perceived date of death of St. Patrick, the most prominent patron saint of Ireland. It's a date when lots of people, Irish or otherwise, like to dress in green, and I've just realised I'm wearing green the day before St. Patrick's Day in order to film this video, meaning that they'll stink by tomorrow, so I'm counting on everybody being too drunk to notice. Anyway, without any more mucking about, here are 4 ways that British and American St. Patrick's Days are very different. We can hardly talk about British versus American St. Patrick's Days without acknowledging the Irish diaspora in both countries. Both Britain and America have seen several Irish migrations into their countries, most notably during the Great Famine of the mid-19th century. And reading around the internet, I often detect a sense of bewilderment among British people and probably Irish people as well. How so many Americans claim that they're Irish just because their great aunt twice removed, if that's even a thing, happened to come from Dublin. And indeed, about 36 million Americans, that's about a tenth of the country, do claim Irish as their primary ancestry. And I get the sense that when Irish Americans say, "I'm Irish," they don't literally mean "I'm Irish." They just acknowledge that Irish culture is a big part of their family's history. As a matter of fact, this also happens in Britain, and why shouldn't it? After all, it is estimated that about 6 million Brits, again about 10% of the population, have at least one Irish grandparent. So clearly in both countries, Irish ancestry is strong. So it only stands to reason that they have celebrations to match. You might be surprised to learn that the modern-day vision of a St. Patrick's Day celebration, with parades and the like, originated not in Ireland, but the United States of America. In fact, there is some evidence that the very first parade took place in St. Augustine, Florida in 1601, 20 years before the Mayflower set sail. The story goes that this parade was organised by an Irish vicar who happened to belong to the Spanish colony. And then later in the 1700s, just as they do today, the Irish communities of Boston, New York, and Philadelphia popularized St. Patrick's Day parades, and after a while these traditions caught on not just in the United States but throughout the world. And having now lived extensively in both Britain and America, my feeling is that America goes a little bit more gung-ho for St. Patrick's Day than perhaps the British do. That's not to say the British don't celebrate, they absolutely do. It's just in America it seems to be just so much more massive and you know, loud. And you might be thinking, well Lawrence, you live in Chicago. Of course it's bigger and louder there, and that's true. But even when I lived in Indiana, my work colleagues, many of whom had no connection to Ireland whatsoever, were absolutely aghast that I forgot to wear green, and they pinched me. What is that all about? Well, the pinching thing seems to be a tradition among people in both countries and also, of course, Ireland. And according to the internet, as the tradition goes, wearing green on St. Patrick's Day is supposed to make you invisible to leprechauns, right? And we all need that. They will pinch you as soon as you come up on their radar if you don't wear green. I'm pretty certain that Susie from accounts was not a leprechaun, so what's her excuse? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked by leprechauns again. Is there any data to back up my theory that Americans, Irish or otherwise, are more into the dressing green thing than British people are? Well, no, but I do have some data to prove that it's by no means just Americans with Irish ancestry that wear green. Yesterday, I put out a poll asking this: American followers, do you typically make an effort to wear green on St. Patrick's Day? After 953 votes, 47.7% of Twitter respondents said yay, and just over 52% said nay. And just in case that's not a large enough data set for the likes of Uncle Toby, I put the same poll out on YouTube. Of the 10,000 who voted, 51 51% said yes and 49% said no. So whichever way we slice it, we can make a reasonable estimate that around about half of all Americans typically plan to wear green on St. Patrick's Day. Now, it is possible that this is about the same in Britain. Unfortunately, I don't have enough British followers to formulate a reliable data set, but from memory, I don't really remember people making a big deal out of it. And one clue that could back up my observation is the size of the parades themselves. Although cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to the effects of COVID-19, Britain's largest St. Patrick's Day event is purported to be the Birmingham Parade, which attracts about 100,000 people, which, you know, that's a lot of people. At least I thought it was. The US boasts several cities with attendance figures greater even than that. Among them San Francisco, Kansas City, Boston, Philadelphia, Savannah. But easily with over 2 million spectators. The biggest parties are to be found in New York City and right here in Chicago. New York's is so big that it has more marchers in its parade than the Birmingham parade has attendees. And of course, one of the draws of the Chicago parade is the dyeing of the river. Indeed, with rivers, fountains, and dare I say it, ponds, producing green liquid is a big part of the American experience on St. Patrick's Day, or in many cases, the weekend before St. Patrick's Day. And that brings us on to this. In Ireland, not surprisingly, St. Patrick's Day is a public holiday. This means that for the most part, Irish people can partake in the festivities without having to complete that spreadsheet for Susie from accounts. But in Britain and America, it's not quite like that. Hence why I was even in a position to be pinched by Susie in the first place. Because despite the large number of Irish Americans and the fact that St. Patrick's Day is America's third biggest drinking day of the calendar year, the celebration just isn't a public holiday here. And as I alluded to, the very same is true of Britain. And you might be thinking, Lawrence, this is supposed to be a video about the differences between British and American St. Patrick's Day. Well, let me finish, because there is something I didn't get a chance to say. There is in fact a British overseas territory where St. Patrick's Day is a public holiday, and that is the Caribbean island of Montserrat. Now, due to the threat of volcanoes on the island and the imposition of an exclusion zone, the island is home to fewer than 5,000 people. But a good percentage of those are people of Irish ancestry. Even the territory's flag features Erin, the personification of Ireland, in a green dress. And I can only hope that she went easy on the Guinness, because that looks like an expensive harp. Oh yeah, and speaking of expense, like all well-meaning holidays/celebrations, the original modest affair of St. Patrick's Day has given way to corporatization and mass merchandising. But when it comes to Britain and America, how much does each country spend on St. Patrick's Day each year? And the answer to that is not easy to find, at least when it comes to Britain. I was able to find a statistic touted by the St. Patrick's Centre that between them, the US and Britain spend about £5.9 billion. For currency completists, that's $7.76 billion. And from what I was able to deduce, around $6 billion of that is spent by American consumers, meaning that we're left to assume that Brits on average spend about $1.75 billion, and no, that's not per person, but it is about £1.1 billion. Personally, I'm a bit skeptical that these numbers are true. I mean, after all, the St. Patrick's Centre incorrectly asserts on its website that St. Patrick's Day is a nationally recognised holiday in the United States. But if they were, it would mean that Brits spend significantly more on St. Patrick's Day paraphernalia and beer than Americans do. And now that I've said beer out loud, it makes sense. So when it comes to the comparative grandness and gremliness of celebrations in Britain and America, we've only got my admittedly dubious polls, my potentially tainted observations, and a highly unsourced website on which to base our findings. I mean, it almost sounds like a conversation you might have in a pub at 11 PM on St. Patrick's Day or on Twitter. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you'll be celebrating St. Patrick's Day. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Thank you to my patrons who also took part in a private poll, and if I get enough new patrons, the dataset from polls just like this will increase. So if you would like to support Lost in the Pond, you can do so today at patreon.com/LostInThePond. Until the next video, goodbye and happy St. Patrick's Day.